Hi, I'm Alex Paulton. I'm here at the Embedded World Show at the Arrow booth with David Sprague. And, well, we've been talking about Arrow's move and the new strategic positioning, but I'd like to get a little bit more depth out of you, David, if you could give us a little bit. And by the way, welcome to the show, and it's really nice to see you.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Alex. And just kind of a little my background. I started as a design engineer 30-something years ago, working in the UK, and then I joined distribution 29 years ago, and Arrow, working as an applications engineer. So I've kind of lived this journey of the evolution from being a traditional distributor to where we now are as a technology provider. So it's it's been a really interesting observation. And when I started my role, and even up until just probably 5-7 years ago, the role of an FAE was very much driven at part level. You know, kind of when I first started out, if you had the National Data Book in your boot or the TI Orange books in your boot, that was what got you into the customer. You know, the level of insight was pretty low then, and then once that started a conversation, you could provide support. But it was all kind of at component level. There weren't really reference platforms, there weren't any designs to pull things together. Engineers knife and forked everything and designed from the chip up. And over those years, you think Moore's Law was what, 1965? And that relentless progress that has made has driven to the point now there's an incredible level of complexity. So you think about Moore's Law driving the increase in compute power, the decrease in power consumption, the decrease in size, and therefore cost of the silicon has meant more and more has been able to do on a chip. So that's like an integrated system, if you like. And then if you couple that with display technology and the evolution there, has meant suddenly this explosion of things that are possible now that weren't possible a few years ago, or were possible but were impractical because they were just too expensive.
Right. Cost prohibitive.
Exactly. And then those features driven at the chip level, that then led on to the next stage, which was enabled solutions to be designed. And engineers were designing the solutions even though they didn't know it. If you take an MCU, that's a solution of something that a few years before that they would have done discretely. And then what that, coupled with the emergence of a lot of new comms standards and capabilities, again, only possible because of the processing power and the power consumption, has then enabled IoT and things to start talking to each other. That then feeds into big data, which then drives the need for even more processing power, and a great increase in complexity. There's a statistic, and it must be true because I Googled it, is that as you increase the amount of code, as you double it, the complexity of designing that code goes up 8-fold. So times 2 code, times 8 complexity. So this has meant that a hardware engineer has then had to become more of a software engineer, and software and firmware has become increasingly important as this miniaturization has driven into the solution design, coupled with the comms, has driven the big data, and then has driven this complexity challenge, which is where we are now. Is that the way an engineer needs to work has changed greatly. And far from when we used to go and take the data book into the customer, now the engineer is usually doing most of his research online. And Arrow clearly has a great digital platform to enable that and enable the engineer to start playing around with it. So if you then look at that position, so the engineer's doing his research online, is kind of where's the value and where's the insight that we as Arrow can add? And that's really where the move we have made from pure traditional distributor, shipping parts, providing data, providing first-line support to the engineer has evolved. So over the last few years, and this isn't something we've just done overnight, we've started to build different competencies. 5 years ago, we had no software engineers in my team at all. By the end of the first half of this year, we will have 20 software engineers working on software, firmware, and apps in our team. That's all part of the enablement that we've added. The other move is that we've moved away from, as customers look at this complexity, is they've started to outsource some of that, either by paying for engineering services, or actually just by buying more integrated solutions. So they look at the whole make versus buy. And you just got to look around the stand today. 5 years ago, this stand here would have been full of components. Now there are no individual components, it's all boards, and they're all running something, demonstrating something. There's some code sat behind it, there's an app sat behind it, that, you've got the FAE controlling the thing through his phone to make the demonstration. And we have to have the resource to build that, because that's what our customers expect. Our customers now want to focus on their core competence, which is to embed their IP into the product. And that may well be that they will take blocks of that, and they will, instead of doing it at chip level, they will put it down the design as a solution or a module level. And that's where we come in, is enabling great products from our suppliers, because our suppliers are still pretty much event-driven on chip release at MPI level. And as they bring out more and more complex chips, we need to take them to market. So we need to have a board, something we can use as a generic reference platform, and often that's enough to get the customer started, and he will take that, and then he will go and do his own chip down design, but he's got 70% of the solution is ready. In the other extreme, he may also say, well, actually, that power block, for example, I can buy that off the shelf. I can go and get something that does what I want to do, and they will put that piece in. And then you've got to do some system integration, so we have to add the resources to support that. So that's kind of, if you like, the virtuous cycle, which has meant the way we've invested and the way we've shaped our engineering team has come to. So now we're at this point where, we're not just simply providing parts as a traditional distributor. We really are a technology partner for our customers. And the questioning at the customer level is different. So when we engage in a customer, instead of being, what MCU do you want to use? Because I can help you with that. I can help steer you down to the best three. We can still do that, and we still do a lot of that. It's much more about talking to their CTO or even their sales lead or their marketing lead to say, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What do you need to give you an edge in your market? And then translating that into an outcome. So actually, it almost becomes a black box conversation with the customer. You want these inputs and these outputs and this transformation, we can do that. And by the way, this is how we recommend you do that. And that actually is a completely different level of conversation than at the engineer level that we used to have. And then the benefits to the customer, is it increased productivity, reduced cost, more efficiency, easier maintenance. The questions we're asking are very, very different, and the problems we're solving are very, very different. And to do that, you have to be a technology partner.
Well, and I think that is a important and significant thing, and I'm really glad to see that Arrow has gone in this direction. And I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us all about this, because I think it's a very critical move in the industry, and the whole aspect of focusing on the solution, on the application, is a big change from the component side.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and the more you do that, and we have 150 reference platforms and SOMs and different solutions working here, the more you do that, the more you build domain expertise. And it's the domain expertise that gives you the insight to be able to go and talk to a customer that looks a bit similar to one you've already supported, but then have a very meaningful conversation quickly, because they clearly understand that you get their market and you get their concerns. So it's a more efficient conversation, and there's much more insight and value that we're adding at the customer level.
Excellent, David. I really appreciate this conversation. I thank you so much for taking the time in this busy show for us.
No problem, Alex. Pleasure.